Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Keslar from Keslar Insurance, and I am thrilled to be here for another episode of Cheers for Charity New Hampshire. And as always, I have the privilege of being here with my dear friend, JoAnn. Hi, JoAnn.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, I'm JoAnn Burchuk. I'm with Lighthouse Physical Therapy. And today with Cheers for Charity, we are so excited to have Carol. And Carol, I have to read the name of your organization because it's a long one. Transportation Assistance for Seacoast Citizens. I want to make sure I got it right. So welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your organization does.
Okay. I'm Carol Gulla. I'm the director of TASC, and yes, Transportation Assistance for Seacoast Citizens. It's a mouthful, which is why we go by TASC. And it's really very simple. We help people maintain their health, independence, and dignity by mobilizing volunteer drivers who provide rides for adults in 11 communities in the Seacoast area who are either age 55 or better, or other adults with a disability or a medical challenge that keeps them from driving. And that's the long and short of it. I do like to focus, I can give you numbers of rides and all that stuff, but I do like to focus on the first part of our mission statement, which is TASC helps people maintain their health, independence, and dignity. And that really is the driving force behind our organization, is people making connections with people.
How did your organization start? Have you been around for a while, or a fairly new organization?
We're actually in our 16th year.
Oh, wow.
It started as quickly as I can. We are housed in Hobbs House, which is owned by Trinity Church in Hampton. And back, 20 plus years ago, there was another group that ran out of Hobbs House that provided rides for older adults in the Hampton area. And then issues started coming up regarding insurance and other kinds of things, and there were concerns. And unfortunately, that program went away. But the people involved realized that it was going to be leaving a big hole. So they started trying to figure out how can we fix this. They began knocking on doors at, quite frankly, the area faith communities in neighboring towns, and said, how do we pull our resources? So they came up with this idea of having a place that would coordinate volunteer drivers, and that people, one stop, people could call and say, I need a ride. That's how TASC was born. I was hired part-time solely to recruit volunteer drivers. And very quickly, it became apparent that 20 hours a week was not going to be enough to cover this need, because besides coordinating volunteer drivers, there had to be somebody here to answer the phones to ensure that people who needed rides were getting the information they needed. So that's how it started. I was tutoring initially and thought this was just going to be a part-time filler, and it took on a life of its own. And here I am more than 15 years later going, how did I get here? But the truth is, I quickly realized that I knew that there were big gaps in transportation resources in the area. I just didn't know how big they were. And I didn't know how really limiting it was. I wasn't at a point yet where I fully understood how limiting it was for people who didn't drive. It's not something we think about until it's in your face.
Oh, exactly.
And often once it's in your face, it's a little too late to, you're scrambling. So that's where it started.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. And you've grown from one community, serving one community, to, you said how many, 13 different communities?
Well, we've got 11. Well, by time TASC actually started, the original program served only Hampton. By the time TASC actually got underway, we were serving 6 communities. We have grown to 11 communities. We serve Brentwood, Exeter, Greenland, Hampton, Hampton Falls, East Kingston, Northampton, Kensington, Rye, Seabrook, and Stratham. And as I said, it's adults 55 and better, other adults with disabilities. And the only thing that restricts our ability to give a ride is having an available volunteer. There's no limit on how far a driver will go. If we have a driver who's willing to go to Boston or Portland or Dartmouth, we'll do it if there's a volunteer available. which does make us a little bit
Let me ask
different.
you about the volunteers. So somebody volunteers, and I assume they're using their own vehicle on their own insurance, and they're also are they provided any sort of assistance with the gas, or is that also, you know, something part of their contribution, I guess?
We do. Most rides are provided by volunteers in their own vehicles. We do have a wheelchair accessible minivan we have a specially trained group of 4 volunteers who can provide some transportation in that van. But for the most part, it's volunteers in their own vehicles. We do have all the necessary, insurances for a small business, but we also provide specific nonprofit liability insurance for our drivers. We want them to know we've got their back. If something goes wrong, we're not going to leave them hanging. And I can very proudly say that over 15 years, going into our 16th year, more than 55,000 rides. The only time I've dealt with my insurance companies is to pay the premium. Drivers, once somebody is registered with us and they go through my song and dance, it's about an hour-long orientation where I show them how to, use the ride scheduling software that we use. They choose what rides they're going to provide each week. So it's very flexible. We do provide mileage reimbursement for those drivers who want to take advantage of it. And I would say about a third of the drivers do. And for those who do, it makes a huge difference in their ability to, to provide the service. But most of the drivers, either they may be self-employed as real estate agents, they may do other things where they're using their vehicles and they deduct the mileage from their taxes. Everyone has a different story, but we do provide mileage reimbursement for those who take it. Yes, and we do require that people have their own auto insurance, but as I said, we do have the excess auto liability policy if there is a problem. So that's the down and dirty stuff we have to talk about, but nobody wants to talk about. But it's a reality, and I'm glad that we're able to do those things to make it, as I said, just to let our drivers know that, we don't want them hanging. We want them to know we care.
And how many volunteers are there, Carol?
Right now, we've got 46, which is we're building back up. We had well over 50 at the beginning of 2020, and March 2020. If you'll recall, March 2020 was not a pleasant month. Things went downhill by the end of March 2020. Most of our drivers, you keep in mind, are active retired people. So when COVID, suddenly appeared on the landscape, and none of us, let's be real, none of us knew which end was up. But we were all being told, if you're 60 or older, watch out. This virus is out to get you. So we went from 53 volunteers at the beginning of March down to 11 by the end of March. We did have a lot of the people who got regular rides, once their families were working from home and working remotely, they were able to pitch in and take care of the medical needs, which was the best case scenario. It kind of kept everybody in their pod. But we had 11 drivers who stayed on the road. We quickly implemented mask wearing. As I said, we really didn't know. We were just trying to follow the best practices we could come up with. So we stayed on the road throughout the pandemic. For those people, I always go to dialysis treatments. Dialysis doesn't stop because of a pandemic. Dialysis is life-sustaining. Cancer treatments didn't stop. People still needed to get food because you can't stay healthy and independent if you're not eating. So we did have this core of volunteer drivers who kind of circled the wagons around some specific people who were really in need. And we are pretty much one of the few organizations that were able to stay on the road continuously throughout the pandemic. And I can very happily say that, to the best of my knowledge, we've had no known transmission of the virus during a TASC ride. And by the end of 2020, we built back up to about 21 or 22 volunteers. We're now back up to about 46. But the demand is increasing as quickly as I can add drivers. The demand and the need for rides is growing as well. We are still requiring masks during rides. Like I said, we've had a really good track record. We're dealing with a lot of people who are medically fragile. And I just don't see at this point in time, the worst of COVID is over, but it's not gone. So I prefer not to take chances. So we are still requiring masks. And other than that, it's, there's no charge for a TASC ride. That's an important piece. because we absolutely do not want cost to be another obstacle for people who need to get where they need to go.
So how are you funded?
We are funded like any other nonprofit. It is a combination of grants, and we do get support from some of the municipalities we serve, as well as some support from the county. We participate in charitable gaming at the Brook, and try to do other fundraisers. Fundraising, once again, too, as we all know, has been a little bit curtailed in the kinds of things you can do, but it's a lot of donations and just, yeah, like anybody else, grants, public appeals, fundraising, and somehow or another, it all works. It shouldn't. Logic tells me that this is just, not, here we have a service that people are providing rides and we're helping to reimburse some of the drivers and all, and we're not bringing in any money, and yet it keeps working. It shouldn't, but it does.
What a great service. And I'm sure, the people that are unable to drive themselves, just really appreciate these volunteers that are able to come out and help them out and get them to their doctor's appointments. And it sounds like groceries or whatever other errands they need to have done.
Yeah, we do social, and it's not just, that's an important thing. We don't restrict it only to groceries and medical. Our drivers are available. We've taken a visually impaired woman to adaptive surf lessons on York Beach. We've, if we've taken people to vote, we've helped people who, we had a woman who was confined to a wheelchair, and one of our drivers took she and her family members out to go look at the holiday lights one year. If there's a need, there is more to life than going to the doctor. And and part of being healthy is staying connected. So voting, going to town meetings, if we have a volunteer available, we'll give the ride.
That's amazing. That's great. I just love that it's more than, just okay, you have a doctor's appointment, we'll take you to that, and then you're on your own.
Right. I remember once, once early on, a woman, you call and she's trying to get her, appointments logged in, and I hear this sigh, and she says, "Oh, Carol, you're going to know you're old when you look at your calendar and all there is doctor's appointments." And that's when I sat there and said, no, do you want to, we've had drivers who'll take somebody to the doctor and then take them for a ride along the beach and buy a lobster roll. It is people, making connections with people.
So what are you finding? What's your greatest need right now?
Our greatest ongoing always is volunteer drivers. And I do try to emphasize to people that we do have some volunteers who work full or part-time, and they'll fit a ride in. We've got one woman, for example, who works in Exeter, and she has typically picked up someone early in the morning, I think 6:30-ish, for dialysis treatments. But she picks her up, then she meets some friends for coffee, and then goes off to work. So she can fit it in before work. We have some people who need rides for dialysis and other treatments Saturday mornings. So people do fit it in around their own schedule, which is one of the beauties of the program. Is once you're signed up, you decide what you're going to do, and you decide what works for you. So yeah, but volunteers, the simple fact of the matter is, I've come to accept there will never be enough volunteers. We do fill about 95% of the requests that come in, but we do occasionally. I had to speak to two women earlier this morning just to give them a heads up that we're still trying to find volunteers to get them covered for appointments. They both talked to their doctors, and their doctors are like, fine, just let us know. But that being said, last year, this intrepid corps of volunteer drivers provided over 3,500 rides. So, and we're not, we're just scratching the surface. We can talk about all the numbers, and we can talk about how the fact that we know New Hampshire is aging. We're getting older, and so the need for transportation is not going to go away. And this is
in the transportation system in the state is
system. Oh,
It's not
please.
very helpful for everybody.
Pray tell, what system are you talking about? No, yeah, transportation is, in terms of public transportation, we all know in this state really is not existent. And it's really, one of the things, and I will always end with something that just says, I want you to take a moment and think, what would you do if you suddenly couldn't drive? How are you going to get anywhere? Where you live right now, wherever you may be, how are you going to get from point A to point B? Hopefully TASC or something like TASC is around to help you out.
It's definitely a consideration in this area. Well, thank you. Why don't you tell everybody what your website is, if people
Oh, the
want
website
to
is,
volunteer, or if they're looking to catch a ride, where do they go?
they go to www.tasc-rides.org. All our information for contacting is there. There's a tab for volunteering, a tab for people who need rides. There is a registration process for both. And for drivers, obviously, we do background checks, so we fully vet them. We do ask people who need rides to register with us, so we have a better idea of who they are, what their needs are. And sometimes we're not the appropriate resource. Sometimes, but we will always try to help them find the appropriate resource. Or they can pop an email, email addresses on the website, or do something really old school, 603-926-9026. The only people you'll talk to is myself, Carol, or our program assistant, Nita, NITA, and we'll be happy to help you with whatever information you need.
Awesome. Carol, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for not only joining us, but the work that you do to help make living in this area of New Hampshire just that much more manageable for those that need the support. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really do appreciate the time.
Fantastic.
Enjoy the rest of this splendid day.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.